Combat in JRPGs of the past often sticks to a familiar structure. Games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or the early Persona titles have you select commands from a menu, prioritizing deliberate choices over direct action. Developers often dress this up with stylish interfaces or flashy animations, like in Persona 5, but underneath, the structure remains largely unchanged. This is also true for rpgmaker games, which were heavily inspired by the former mentioned classics. So when a game comes along that rethinks this structure, it's worth paying attention. Hi, I'm Lorden, and welcome to Mind Behind Media. In this episode, I want to talk about the unique and innovative combat system of Helen's Mysterious Castle. The combat system revolves around three stats: effectiveness, defend, and weight. These apply equally to both you and your opponent. Weight is the most important stat because it determines both your and your opponent's turns. Whenever you choose an action, a timer begins to count down. This timer represents how long it will take before your opponent gets to act. And when the timer drops below 0, the enemy takes their turn. 0 counts as a number in this case. Every action has a weight cost, and that cost determines how many moves you can make before the enemy responds. Within this time frame, you have the chance to have your own turns. So if the weight stat is at 10 and your action has a weight of 5, you have 2 turns before the enemy's action is executed. So instead of altering turns in a fixed order, combat becomes a race towards a finish line. The defense stat is what protects you or the enemy from an attack. If the defense stat is higher than the effectiveness stat, the attack is nullified, except for one important twist: the pierce attribute. This attribute largely ignores defend. In addition to that, there are magical attacks, which can only be partially blocked. Some weapons, like the broadsword, also have a defense stat, combining attack and defend into one single action. What's interesting is how simple this system is. There are no lists of stats, no hidden modifiers, just 3 numbers and a single special trait. And yet, this creates a surprising amount of depth. Because battles are fought one-on-one, each encounter becomes a sort of puzzle. You're not just reacting, you're planning ahead. Do you commit to a slower, more powerful attack? Or do you act quickly, trying to defeat your enemy before they can have their turn? There is the possibility to win a fight completely without taking damage. As a result, battle outcomes can be predicted most of the time. This may seem complicated on paper, but you learn the system quickly and intuitively while playing. All of this is reinforced by the game's presentation. Unlike the static battle screens of older JRPGs, where characters line up and take turns, Helen's Mysterious Castle feels dynamic and alive. The camera shifts between combatants, the screen darkens, attacks land with weight, turning the encounter into a spectacle instead of a chore. But perhaps the most unusual feature is what the game doesn't include. At the end of every fight, you gain experience points, but no money. There are no level ups and no shops. You find all of your gear throughout the dungeon. Your character has no stats of her own, no strength, dexterity, or charisma. In that sense, this game is not a real RPG. There's a lot of confusion about what actually defines an RPG, and ultimately, it comes down to interpretation. But if you look at how these games work, a common thread starts to emerge. In an RPG, you interact with the game world through a layer of systems. Your choices, your abilities, even your chances of success are filtered through stats. They are the lens through which you experience the game. And this usually goes hand in hand with some form of progression, experience points, and level ups, or at least something similar to that. And games like Planescape Torment and Disco Elysium are good examples, but so are games like Deus Ex, even though they're often labeled as immersive sims. And that's where things start to blur when it comes to what an RPG is and what's not. In Helen's Mysterious Castle, All progression is tied to equipment. You invest your experience points into upgrades of your gear. A longbow, for example, becomes a longbow +1, +2, +3, and so on. This creates an addictive quality, but in a good way. It's simply fun and rewarding. The Thunder spell, for instance, doesn't just get stronger, it also can be used faster with upgrades. This has an interesting consequence. You don't build your character, you build your loadout. The only aspect of the combat I'm unsure about is that you don't know what the enemy's first action will be. You have to anticipate it. It seems to depend on the action you choose, but I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. As a result, combat starts to resemble something like real-world fighting. I'm a martial artist. I've trained in boxing, K1 kickboxing, full contact and semi-contact karate, among various other styles. In martial arts, success doesn't come from just strength alone. It's about timing, reading your opponent, waiting for openings, and choosing the right moment to act. And that's exactly what this system captures. You're constantly balancing offense, defense, and patience, trying to outthink, outmaneuver, and not just outpower your opponent. It's a gameplay-focused experience and a great lesson for developers who want to create unique combat systems. Because once you understand its foundation, you can start to imagine what could be built on top of it. And that's the focal point of this episode. This combat system's potential for expansion. Building on top of a system like that could lead to something extraordinary. Dodge counters, and even parry counters could be implemented. What if instead of finding new weapons, you'd learn new techniques? Imagine a traveling warrior or samurai who learns and defines different styles through experience. The possibilities for both gameplay and storytelling are nearly endless. Helen's Mysterious Castle costs only $2 in Steam, and I highly recommend buying it and learning from it. I've heard that you can even open it with the rpgmaker 2000, the engine it was built with. This allows you to experiment with its mechanics and study them firsthand. But I leave the rest to you. Go out and create something unique and beautiful. Have fun, and don't forget that saying RPG games is for losers. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day.